a lot of people think that homeowners want the cheapest price, but really what homeowners want is the best deal. They want the highest amount of value for their dollar, and that doesn't always mean that that's the lowest total dollars. So what are the things that you're doing in your sales process to increase the value? Are you going to the homeowner's house, looking at it, going home and texting them a price with no context that night or the next day? Or are you going in, are you educating them? Are you doing a walkthrough? Are you providing them a detailed proposal in person? Are you talking through it? Are you asking them what matters to them? Are you asking them if they've ever had a painter before? Are you presenting to both homeowners? Are you just answering all of their questions and presenting a price and asking for the job on the spot? Or are you just texting them a price with no context?
When your leads are low and your sales are slow, who you gonna call? Brush Buster. Scaling up the game. Big projects, friend. Who you gonna trust? Brush Busters. We write your letters every day. Help you find a way. Brush Busters. We ain't afraid of no cold. We ain't afraid of no Brush Busters.
What's up, everybody? Mike Hickman here, founder of paintergrowth.com, and you're listening to a Brush Busters episode of the Painter Growth Podcast, episode 3. And we are joined today by my co-host and one of my best friends, Jesse, one of our top coaches at Painter Growth. And stoked to hang with you for a bit, man. Let's answer some questions.
Yeah, stoked to be here, man. It's gonna be super fun.
Yeah. So just as a reminder of the format, basically we take your questions, you can submit them to the podcast, you can email them to us. We take some from our clients in our Slack group, and we answer them on the air, and we do some coaching, some live coaching, and hopefully everyone can benefit and realize that other people are having the same issues that you're facing as well. So we got a first question here. Jesse, do you want to read the first question? I think this first one's about weather.
Perfect. Okay, so this one's about dealing with unpredictable weather. So, hey, coaches at Painter Growth, hope you are all good. Recently, I've been battling with Mother Nature. It seems every time I schedule an exterior painting job, she decides to throw a curveball. How do you recommend navigating unpredictable weather conditions without derailing project timelines or damaging our reputation? Appreciate your insights. Cheers. That's from Arthur from Ontario.
Oh, man. The dreaded Canadian weather. I mean, we're both pretty familiar with.
And so I resonate a lot with this being up in Vancouver and on the West Coast. And we always call June January because June is always the most unpredictable month out here. So we've had to deal with this a lot.
Yeah, I mean, this year especially, like in Canada, normally I'm in Saskatchewan, and normally like from like the end of May it starts to dry out, and like June, July, August, September you get like great painting. But we had like 6 inches of rain in June, and like first week of July was like pretty wet too, and like it just started to get warm. So like last week was pretty much the first like actual hot week of summer we had.
Yeah. When the weather throws curveballs like that, it can either do one of two things. You can like totally derail a company in the season for the year, or you can, if you plan appropriately, you can leverage it and have it as a huge win for yourself. So in my opinion, this goes many layers deep. Where do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first place that I want to start is pretty basic, but it's just like customer expectations. So you book a job, actually 2 parts: customer expectations and then communication. So like, hey, just so you know, like if it rains, like we're gonna have to push you back. Like we're doing your deck. You don't want us to paint your deck if it's wet, right? Are we on the same page? Okay, you agree? And then not only setting those expectations, but like if it does actually rain and you have to reschedule the client, are you actually rescheduling them? Or are you just like assuming that they know?
Yeah, that's, if you don't have that in place, then everything else we talked about doesn't really matter, right? Because that's going back to the question about the reputation. As long as you communicate with clients, your reputation is going to be intact. People are understandable. They understand that things outside of your control happens. As long as you communicate it, then your reputation should be more than fine on that end. Going into a little bit more of the practical, I can tell you one of the biggest mistakes I made in my company one year was I stacked all this exterior work throughout the month, and I just primarily focused on booking exterior work, and we literally had no interior jobs as backup and whatnot. In our entire month of May, this was 3 years ago, our entire month of May was almost completely washed out. And so when I was managing, we had 5 crews at that time lined up. So you have those 5 customers, and then you're looking ahead to the next week. You have another 5 customers that you're planning for. I was communicate with customers about 3 weeks ahead. Then you have the next 5 customers. You can imagine that every time we're pushing back, I'm really communicating with at least 15 different clients to make sure that things are lining up. So when we got pushed back 5 weeks, it was just so much communication to make sure that people were, again, making sure that our reputation stayed intact, customers were communicated to. There's not much you can do in terms, if the weather's just not working, cooperating for next year, there's just not much you can do on those jobs. So what do I do moving forward now is I always make sure that we have backup interior jobs available, right? And so what I do with those, and I communicate to customers as we're heading into the summer season, I try to book a bunch of interior jobs. But what I tell those customers is I say, hey, we're actually in our exterior season right now, but if you're flexible on timeline, then I usually give them a little bit of a discount. So if you're flexible and I can throw you in when we have a rain day, because it's going to happen, then would you be willing to do that? And I'll give you a little bit of a discount to do that. A lot of customers are more than happy to do that if they get a discount. They're willing to do that on timeline. It's usually not much, maybe 5 or 10%, but having all those jobs in the backup. One thing that I tell everyone that I always try to avoid is idle labor. So if I have crews available, if I have painters or subcontractors available, I always want them to be painting. You never want them to be idle. And so the next year, I planned considerably better. Our sales strategy and marketing was considerably better, where I could just pop in these interior jobs when those rain days happen. But I would always make sure that the jobs weren't too crazy big, right? I would always try to make sure that they were kind of about 2K to 5K, so that we could pop in for 1 to 3 days, finish those jobs fully, so that I didn't get into the issue if we opened up a 10K job and that was a 5 to 7 day job, where if we had nice days, once you start an interior job, you really want to finish it for the customer, right? And so that's a really big note here, is when you have these pop-in jobs, try to book a bunch of these 2 to 5K jobs where you can just kind of throw them in at will. And then when we do get nice days, I ask my painters to work longer on those nice days, especially when we're behind. So I say, hey, we didn't work on these days because of the weather, so let's put in some longer days here, so we still get in the hours. You're still making the money that you want to make. So those are a few really in the weeds actions that I use to make sure that we avoid idle labor and we have these backup jobs, and so I don't end up in a spot where we had 5 weeks of no production like I did a few years ago.
Yeah, that kind of brings up one other thing, idle labor. So if you did only have exterior jobs, the expectation I set with my painters is that you're working 40 hours a week, and maybe those 40 hours are Monday to Friday, but if Thursday and Friday rain and you're sitting at home because you're not working, you're working Saturday and Sunday if it's sunny. Like that's just how it is. And if you want to make the money that you want to make this summer, you have to do that, and you tie back to the goals and whatnot. I think a really important tool that many painting contractors don't use, or don't use the right tool for, is a production planner, or production schedule rather. So having some sort of like spreadsheet or software, some tool where it's like a holistic view of your entire production season, all of your booked work, how many days each are going to take, which crew they're scheduled for, how many hours they're going to take, what the revenue is, and then you can play. I think you like to use this term, but like play chess with your business, right? You can just move jobs around, and then you can add notes and annotations and know like which clients are getting communicated with, which jobs are getting pushed back, which clients are flexible, which clients aren't. And then just like, it's just way more better. It's way more accurate than simply using something like Google Calendar and just putting your jobs in Google Calendar, because you can't see that like holistic view of which crews are doing what job when and how much is it worth and all that.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know how I could ever run my business without using a production planner like we're talking about here. Because when I was doing the day-to-day of running the operations, I was living on my production planner, even though I had a production manager in place too. I'm always living on that to make sure that, like I said, we're playing chess, we're slotting in jobs, we're always optimizing. How can we move jobs around so that they best fit the specific crew, so they best fit the weather. I'm living on the production planner. I'm living on the weathernetwork.com, and then communicating all this to the production managers. We're going back and forth to optimize for weather for specific crews on jobs, and then communicating that to clients. So, and speaking of the weather too, I think that one thing that people miss is how much people don't go into the details of looking at the weather. So they just look and see that it says either sun or rain. Like I go into the weather network and I'm going hour by hour, right? So even if it says rain, and then I'll see it's like, oh, it says rain till 10 a.m. Great. We're going to have a 12 p.m. start that day, and we're going to work on the back half of that day. That whole day is not a write-off. So you also want to optimize for those either later starts, or if it's going to rain in the afternoon, you start at 7 a.m. or 6:30 a.m. if the customer allows it, and that's okay. And you can still get in a full day before 2 p.m. and then the rain comes in, later. So,
or if the rain stops at 1 or stops at noon, you guys can get in at 2 and get started and paint until 7 or 8. Like we got sun until 8 or 9 right now. So
yeah, especially up in Canada, you get the long summer evenings. So
yeah, I looked at the weather network today and it was like sunrise at 4:59, sunset at like 9:10.
Yeah, that's the best.
Yeah, I love it. So just making sure we answered the whole question. So that's kind of dealing with Mother Nature, scheduling exterior, throwing curveballs. Yeah, I think the moral of the story is like organization, have like tools in place that allow you to see that holistic view. But two, realize that your job transitions from being like a manager to being like a masters of communication. And like that is your whole role, is like communicate with the painters, communicate with your clients, and just make sure that like there's no such thing as over communicating with your clients. Let them know every day if they're being pushed back more.
Yeah, I always have a joke with my production manager. I'm like, we're basically just a logistics company at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're just moving the logistics, playing chess with the business.
Yeah, well, Hormozy says like at every level, eventually at some level of business, all businesses begin to look the same.
Yeah.
So even at that level, like logistics, if you're just looking at what just like that you're organizing something, like that can look very similar to like a different style of business that's also organizing something based on external factors. So just follow the rules and be organized and communicate lots, and you should be good to go. And have backup interiors.
100%. It's a huge, having those backup interiors, those really come in clutch.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, that idle labor, it's one thing to book, $1 million in a year. It's another thing to produce it and to collect it. And you need to have, on average 40 hours per week of production per painter if you want to do that and be profitable. So
Yeah,
all these strategies are important.
We always say it's not how much you book, it's how much you produce, right?
And it's not how much you produce, it's how much you keep.
Yeah, that's right. And ultimately, it's how much you keep. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, Arthur, I hope that was helpful, and anyone else there. So now we're going down to pricing and negotiations. I can read this one if you don't mind.
Okay.
Hello, coaches. I need help with pricing. Finding the right price is hard. I want to sell more, but at good rates where I still make money. How do you guys handle pricing? Any tricks to explain your prices even when your competitors are lower? Thanks a bunch. Frank from Seattle.
Frank, it's a great question. Also,
Yeah,
there's also a lot of depth to this question.
Yeah. I mean, just breaking it down, there's like finding the price, selling more at higher rates, still making money, and then getting lowballed. So where do you want to start it with this?
Let's start with, where is your price right now, right? So the easiest way I do this is to just know, actually, am I estimating, proper prices? Is I'll just go look at my job cost cards, or my, whatever you call it, you reviewing your profitability per job. I always want my paint rates to be, somewhere in the ballpark of 8 to 12%, right? And so if you look at your jobs right now, overall, right? Obviously, some jobs like stucco jobs are going to be a lot higher than that, but trim jobs will be, maybe 3 or 4%. But overall, on average, are you about 8 to 12%? If you're dramatically higher than that, then you're likely not or you're not quoting high enough, right? So right there, you just kind of know you're off. And then your labor rates, If you're internal crews or subs, generally about 30 to 40%. Now, if it's dramatically lower than that, then your prices might be a little high, right? You might be quoting a little bit high. So those are always the numbers that I look for: is labor rates between 30 and 40%, paint rates between 8 and 12%, just to know, is my pricing right? I always say this in our program as well: to really build a sustainable painting business for the long haul, rather, your gross margin should be at least 45% or higher over the long haul, because that allows you to make enough on the job to pay for all the fixed overhead costs that are associated with the business, and that you can actually invest in growth, invest in the infrastructure required so that you can scale to get to the next level. So those are always the key numbers that I'm looking at for making sure that my pricing is accurate. Do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, 45%, 50% is kind of like the gold standard. If you can maintain 50% gross margin, then you're good. Now, keep in mind, a lot of guys listening to this, number one, paint, are still on the tools. Not everyone is, of course, but a lot of people are, and I'm going to address that. And the second is that a lot of people, I'm talking to you, listening, you need to do your job costing. You need to cost your jobs. If you're listening to this and you're not costing your jobs, use this as your warning. You need to keep your receipts for your paint, add them up for every job, figure out how much you pay your painters on each job site, add that up, figure out percentages, and cost your jobs. There's lots of templates online. We have a template here. Shoot me an email if you want a template for that. Now, if you're on the tools, it's a mistake that a lot of guys make when they're small is they don't count their labor rate into their pricing, into their job costing. So what that means is, if you are the only painter on site and you produce a job and you're like, oh, wow, it was a $1,000 job. I spent $100 on paint. I made $900, right? Okay. But what you didn't classify is, like, you're working as a painter and you're working as the owner. So as the owner, you're aiming for that 50% gross margin. As a painter, you're probably making $25 an hour. So you want to, when you cost your jobs, classify yourself as a painter, add up each hour at a comparable market rate, and then see how much you made on that job. And that's what you want to be at 50%. And if you can keep that at 50%, then you know that you're bidding high enough where you can actually hire painters, pay them at a market rate, and still make that 50%.
Yeah, and just one note on that, so people don't get caught in the weeds, because some of you that are listening right now say, well, I paint much faster than $25 an hour. Then use the rate whatever you paint, right? If it's $75 an hour, then use that rate, but you still factor that into your labor budget, and then see what the business makes. So how much am I making by working in the business by painting, and then how much is the business actually profiting on that job?
Yeah, good clarification. Then the other part of that is not selling on price, but selling on value.
Mm-hmm.
The common misconception is that a lot of people think that homeowners want the cheapest price, but really what homeowners want is the best deal. They want the highest amount of value for their dollar, and that doesn't always mean that that's the lowest total dollars. So what are the things that you're doing in your sales process to increase the value? Are you going to the homeowner's house, looking at it, going home and texting them a price with no context that night or the next day? Or are you going in, are you educating them? Are you doing a walkthrough? Are you providing them a detailed proposal in person? Are you talking through it? Are you asking them what matters to them? Are you asking them if they've ever had a painter before? Are you presenting to both homeowners? Are you just answering all of their questions and presenting a price and asking for the job on the spot? Or are you just texting them a price with no context?
Yeah, and just to add to that, if people are ever really concerned about price, the biggest thing, obviously following all the process that we recommend and teach here, but is you haven't understood their needs. You've totally missed their needs, right? And so, what are ways that you can actually understand people's needs? Have you had your house painted before? What's been your experience like? Has it been good or bad? Tell me about it. And you want to hear for specific things that they're going to say, like, they were really clean when they were here. The attention to detail was amazing. They didn't have any touch-ups. They arrived when they said they were going to arrive. They painted quickly. Whatever is really important to them, then when you're doing a walk around the customers, or you're talking about the proposal, you're specifically hammering those key points that are important to them, right? And that actually demonstrates that A, you're listening to what they're saying, and B, that's the value to them, so they actually know. So a lot of people, and what I see is a lot of painting company owners, they do all these amazing things in their business. They arrive on time. They have WCB, or the work compensation. They have liability coverage. They have a guarantee. They have warranty. First thing I see is people forget to talk about that during the estimate. They literally just forget to talk about it, and customers don't know that. But because we talk about it every day, you automatically assume customers know. You have to call it out every single estimate, every single time that you're doing that. And then B, alternatively, what they do is they rip off all those things. So they say, we have this, we have this, we have this, we have this, and they're just machine gunning that out, and it overwhelms people. Instead of them saying, hey, safety is really important to me, and you say, you know what? This is why we price our jobs the way we do, is to give our painters enough time so they don't feel rushed and they're going to be really safe. And we had full WCB coverage as well. And actually, safety is the most stressful part of my job, is to make sure that all my guys are really safe. And that's our number one priority in our team, is that all our guys are safe. Like, that's how you demonstrate value, if that's one of their concerns.
The one that I like is asking them any horror stories that they've had working with contractors.
Yeah.
Right. So not necessarily going into what they like, what they know they like, but what do they know that they don't like? It's like, oh yeah, we had a roofer come by and oh man, he left nails all over the yard. It's like, okay, well, that tells me that job site cleanliness is really important to you. Can you tell me about that? Or yeah, these roofers, they never told us when they were coming and going. Okay, well, that tells me that communication is really important. Here's our communication cadence. Here's all the checkpoints that we're going to have with you throughout the pre-project process, the planning process, the project, and the post-project. Here's all the touch points. Here's my number. Here's a production manager's number. Like, we're always in constant communication, and you just hammered that point home.
Yeah. And again, if people are keep coming back to price with you, you're just not demonstrating enough value, and you just have to go deeper with people. And so if they say one thing, and you can't keep the conversation going, there's always two things that you can say to keep any conversation going. That are two of my favorite lines. Number one is, oh, that's super interesting, tell me more about that. Right? Or number two is, that's super interesting, why would you say that? Right? You can say those two things and it keeps every conversation going. And so I just want to go deeper and deeper and deeper with the customers to really get to their pain points, and then to really understand their needs holistically, so that they know that I understand that, and then I can demonstrate the value there.
It's like, why is job site cleanliness important to me? I think it started in my childhood.
Yeah.
My father, he didn't pay attention to me, and I had to.
Yeah. There's some of my customers, man, I've got to some deep levels with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then back on the tactical, just the last kind of like, it's a lot of, I'm trying not to go too heavy into like the tactical here, because they're the technical or whatever, but there's a concept called charge rate. And how we use charge rate is like, if you take your job, say you have $1,000 job and it takes you 10 hours to do. So you take 1,000 divided by 10, and that's $100 per hour. So, and your charge rate is basically how much is your company charging out per hour, all in, paint and materials and everything, for your painters. So if you have two painters on site, 5 hours each, 10-hour job, that's $100 an hour. Hopefully that made sense. You want your charge rate to be between, like right now, market is kind of like between $75 and $90 per hour. If you do a job and you take your total price and divide it by how many hours it took to produce that job, and it comes between 75 and 90, you're probably pricing pretty fairly.
Yeah. And then there's the added element of just being confident in your pricing too, right? Just being so confident that this is the price, and you can demonstrate and deliver the value that's in that price. And then the last part of the question is dealing with competitors, or dealing with people potentially lowballing you. So first and foremost is understand that there's always going to be a few people that just lowball you. And if I always expect that I'm going to lose 20% of all of the estimates we do just based on price. That's just math, right? So if I do 10 estimates, I'll just automatically lose 2 of them to price. So if you're around that, then it's not really a problem, right? But if you start getting higher than that, that's where you want to go into your pricing. Then to also understand that, do you know your competitors in the area, and do you kind of have a rough idea of what they're charging? So I'll just give a specific line that I use all the time, because I understand where we're priced in the market. So say, hey, if you went out and got 10 quotes, there'd probably be 5 or 6 that are lower than mine, and then like 4 or 5 that are higher. That's where we play. We're somewhere right in the middle, and that's where we like to play. But we always deliver, I would say a 13 out of 10 experience for that mid price. And I'm confident in this, and the reason why I'm so confident in our pricing at that is that there's one company that's in the area, and I know that every time we do a quote for them, they're literally double, like verbatim. And so it gives me a lot of room to play. And because I know that, I'm even more confident in our pricing, where I can show up and say, like, totally, I get it. There's going to be people that are lower. There's definitely people that are higher, and I know those people. But we're right in the middle, and we're here to give you the best experience for the best price we can.
Yeah. And I think that there's a point, in my opinion, and this is like, I think I don't know, hot take. I think that you should price your jobs so that you can keep about a 50% profit margin. Like, I don't think it's fair or necessary to charge a homeowner more than that just because you can. I think that you should be aiming for about a 50% profit margin. And like, I had a friend way back, he's a farmer, and he would say to me that pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. And his mindset around that was like, if you're just you're honest, and you keep going, and you're hardworking, and you do what you're supposed to do and get what you're supposed to get, like, you're gonna have a long life and you're gonna get fat. But if you try to like have a couple of those jobs, you're like, I can push, this client's got a really nice car, like, let's crank the price up a little bit, then that's where the hogs get slaughtered thing, and it's just not a great way to do business, especially if it's um, out of character or out of morals.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I broke into this really, really wealthy, ultra wealthy neighborhood just based on that what you're talking about alone, because everybody else that would go in there would automatically 2x their price. And I went in there and I just said, I'm just going to keep quoting what I normally quote. And all of a sudden, we became the go-to painter in this ultra nice area, and just started dominating that because I just live by that. We're going to target that, 45 to 50% gross margin, whether the person is in ultra wealthy neighborhood or they're, in a standard neighborhood. It's the same for us. Obviously, the houses are bigger, so the quotes will be higher, but the actual margins we're making the job are the same.
Yeah, how it should be.
Yeah, we get a lot of referrals from that.
Yeah, if you can price fairly and do good work, and yeah, we're good.
Cool.
We could probably chat about pricing for like a full hour, but shall we go into the? I think we're just doing three today, so we'll go to the third and last. No, today. This is actually a pretty fun one.
Yeah, you want me to read it out?
Yeah, sure, read it.
Okay. So this one's all about dealing with a difficult employee. So, dear Painter Growth coaches, I recently hired a painter who worked for me last year when my business was less professional. He's a 30-year veteran with great skills, and he's set in his ways. He recently moved back here and lives out of his van. It's interesting, which he parks in front of clients' houses. Even more interesting, creating a poor impression. He plays loud music, shows up in bare feet and cut off pants, and has poor hygiene. He acts more like a friend than employee and often interrupts me when I'm speaking to clients. He insists on being paid as an hourly subcontractor, but doesn't have the necessary work safe and insurance. Despite his issues, he's a very competent painter. He's a respected leader amongst the crews. And I'm hesitant to let him go because I'm in the middle of a big project and unsure about the new hires. I'm torn between dealing with his behavior or risking the unknown with the new employees. Sincerely, Ryan from Alberta.
Yeah,
Ryan,
I
that's
actually changed his name. That's not his real name. I changed his name because he's a client, and I didn't want uh, this story to get out. But it's because a little bit more personal one. But anyway, if you're listening to this one, you know who you are. So Jesse, where do you want to go with this first?
uh, this is a super interesting one because you can see the elements where, again, there's a lot of elements to this where he's rehired this person, right, where he's worked for him in the past. Um, this person, Ryan, has done a lot in the past, few months or years, it sounds like, to really professionalize his business. So it's very different than when he worked for them in the past. And then there's the element of he's in the middle of a job right now and he's kind of scrambling. Do I have any other people to get this done or not? So um, based on that, where do you want to start there?
Before we get into that, I did have a similar kind of painter that worked for me. His name was Justin, and he was scruffy, kind of looked homeless. And one day he actually we were painting in apartment building, and I think he got heat stroke because some of the residents found him like asleep in the shower of, like, they had an indoor racquetball court in this like condo. And like the residents like found him there, like, sleeping in the showers. And I got a complaint call, obviously, from the building manager. um, so kind of a little bit familiar dealing with someone like that, but this person sounds like he's a good leader. He's a good painter, he's competent. He just has like some behavioral and some hygiene issues that need to be dealt with.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. That's okay. So let's just break this down one by one. So it sounds like when when this person when Ryan rehired this person, it sounds like there was maybe a misstep there on sitting down with him and going over, a new contract with him, given the updates to the company and the new expectations and everything that had been done. Because if that step had been done prior, then likely this person would know that the things that he's doing right now wouldn't be acceptable. It sounds like he kind of just hired him and assumed that this guy, you know, because he worked from in the past, that he could just kind of roll in and just get started right away. So I would say, moving forward, if you do plan on rehiring somebody that's worked for you in the past and you think it's going to be a good fit, the first thing that I would do is just sit them down, go for a coffee, and always use an agreement, right? Always use an agreement to make sure that things are super black and white, and say, hey, I really, I know I'm really excited to be working together again. We have made, a number of different changes since you've left. Here's what the changes are, and here's what it's going to look like, and go, line by line, to make sure that this person knows the new expectations. They aren't living off the previous expectations if you're going to bring that person in. So that's the first thing that I would do moving forward. In Ryan's situation right now, I would say, is there an opportunity to have that conversation with him now and pull him off site to go have a coffee with him, to go over the new expectations again with him and say, is this something that you can agree to? Yes or no? And if he can't, then it sounds like you know your answer, Ryan. But if he can't understand that, then I would backtrack and go there first.
Yeah, like this guy sounds like a strong personality, right? And sometimes
Mhm.
strong personalities can't be recoached. And I think some of the, I mean, definitely some of the behaviors that are being conveyed there are not behaviors that are going to be explicitly discussed in a contract, an agreement. Like, do not park the van that you're living in front of the homeowner's house and blast music. Like, some things don't need to be said, but in this case, they do need to be said. So I think it's really important when having these critical conversations with an individual like this, to really separate their behavior from their personality. So like, this is not who you are. This is what you're doing. You criticize the behavior, not the person, right? Not you are a messy person. You are, dirty person. You are a person who needs a shower. It's like, here's some behaviors that you're doing. And I think that it would be better if you didn't do those behaviors, right? Criticize the behavior. And then if he's open to change, just be really explicit on expectations. Here's what you're doing now. Here's what I need you to be doing. And here's why.
Yeah, yeah, that's really, really well said. I want to address the one part where he says that he often interrupts me when I'm speaking directly to clients and kind of treating them as a friend. So what I would do in that situation is, obviously, you never want to criticize him in public, or you never want to criticize, him in or give him feedback, constructive feedback, in front of the customer. So when that would happen, I would do it right in the moment. Like, if that ever happened again, what Ryan could do is pull this gentleman aside and have a conversation with him privately afterwards, and say, and just level with him, right? Say, hey, we need to have a conversation. What just happened there? That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable for these reasons. And to just review that situation with them, but do it right then and there when it happens, and say, moving forward, these are my expectations and this is what I expect. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, ultimately it comes down to leadership, right? This is what we're talking about, is like being a leader, setting expectations, and then holding your team accountable to those expectations. Ryan, not saying that you are one, but saying a weak leader would not, or a boss who's not a leader would just like allow those things to happen because production is happening. They're being productive. They're getting things done. But I always like to ask, is this in the best, if I was running a 7-figure business, would this behavior be acceptable? If I was running an 8-figure business, would this behavior be acceptable? Would this person be allowed to be employed by my biggest competitor? And if it's a clear no, then obviously that's not in alignment for where I'm trying to go. So that would gauge my decision a lot quicker than me trying to kind of deal with it. So I totally get, and actually had a conversation last week with a client on sacrificing short-term, actually this might have even been on the last brush bus, I can't remember, but sacrificing short-term pain in production for long-term gain in the business. So yes, while you might lose out on production on this one big project that you're doing for the next couple of weeks, if you spend the next week, instead of dealing with his shit, looking for another painter, doing interviews, doing recruiting, doing hiring, doing some training, and finding someone else who's a better fit over the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, are you going to be further ahead or behind because you lost a week of production right now?
Yeah, and that's really the root and the core of this problem, right? If we go, we're talking about symptoms right now. He has this guy, but if you go to the core of it, I think a lot of people put up with crap, or whatever you want to call this, because they feel like there's nobody else. But that's just not true, right? If you, one thing that we're always doing is we're always running ads for subcontractors, or we're always running ads for painters, right? The reason why I say this too is imagine you still had a painting company, right? And you had this rock star painter, and this person decided to move out to where I'm at in Vancouver. And if I wasn't running ads because I was like, oh no, I'm good, I got staff, that person's not gonna see ads, and I might not recruit this A+ rock star, right? And so that's why I say always be recruiting no matter what. And then you get in a position. It's similar to sales. Is it easier or harder to sell a job if you need to book a job next week for your crew, or you're booking 8 weeks out? Right? It's significantly easier to book a job when you're not desperate. Same thing. It's significantly easier to attract top talent when you're not desperate. So you want
And
to be in
also, if you're desperate for hiring and you have this like 1 week window where you need to hire, all you get is the people who are looking for a job within that 1 week period. It's a very small pie.
Yeah. So like I said, look for people for the long haul. And then again, going back to the root, when Ryan, you've professionalized your company, you've done all this work, stick to those standards and stick to who you're becoming with your company. Don't fall back into that. I generally find rehiring people that have worked for me in the past and trying to hire them down. I've done it before too. It works for like a month maybe, and then realize that we've just gone separate ways at that point. So just for anybody that are looking in the past, like of course there's anomalies in the situation. There's going to be that the odd diamond in the rough that comes back and is an absolute rock star. But generally, if someone's worked for me in the past and we parted ways, they try to come back in. It typically doesn't pan out.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. It's just like, who do you want to be? Is this person fit with your vision? And as you become more professionalized business and you become a better leader and you grow as a company, like initially you're thinking about like, what am I doing today? What am I doing tomorrow? And then as you grow a bit, it's like, oh, what am I doing next week? And then you keep growing. It's like, oh, what am I doing next month? And then what am I doing next quarter? And then what am I doing next year? And then eventually, as a CEO of a large organization, you spend a lot of your time thinking, what am I doing? What are we going to be doing in 5 years? And thinking out like in terms of like being a visionary. So as a small business owner, how can you make yourself think further, have a longer time horizon, and make your decisions based on those longer time horizons? Is this in the best interest of my business right now because I'm hungry right now and I need food? Or is this best interest of my business in 6 months from now because I can see where the trajectory of my company and this is in alignment with my vision?
Yeah, I love this conversation around time horizons. There's two ways to use this, right? Number one is if you're going through a real painful time right now, if you're like on the tools and this job's like a nightmare or you're dealing with a tough customer, you want to shorten the time horizon and you want to say, can I just get through today? Can't get through today, can I get to lunchtime? You want to shorten that time horizon. But then as we think as business owners, like you said, it's when you start to look past what's right in front of you within the next week or two, and you start to open up that time horizon and say, in 6 months, if this person was still working for me and they were still doing these things, would I be okay with that?
Yeah.
Right. And so playing with those time horizons can really help you in both situations, either shortening for your own stuff day to day, or expanding it to see a bigger picture here.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a pretty sufficient answer. Hopefully, Ryan, that gives you a little bit of ammo and some direction. We're not going to tell you exactly what to do, but we can give you some ideas of what we might do in that situation. So
yeah, hopefully that helps.
Yeah. Well, thanks for hopping on this one, Jesse. It was pretty easy convo, and I hopefully some more people other than just Ryan and the questions we answered got value out of the responses today.
Yeah, looking forward to read more letters, more questions. So yeah, keep them coming. Send us emails, send us letters, and we'll keep solving problems as best we can.
Perfect. Yeah, if you want to send in a question, you can send it into what email? We should probably make a dedicated email for this, but support@paintergrowth.com, or you can send it in the Q&A in the podcast on Spotify.
Perfect.
Thanks for tuning in.
When your leads are low and your sales are slow, who you gonna call? Brush Buster. Scaling up the game, big projects, friend.